The Astro Nomad had seen better days, but then again, so had its crew. Captain Ryler leaned back in the worn-out pilot seat, trying to ignore the persistent creak it made as if the chair was in its death throes. "Remind me why we took this gig again, Jax," he asked, glancing over at the tech-savvy engineer who was smack dab in the middle of what seemed to be an intense staring contest with a blinking console. "Because we're broke, Cap, and because no one else is dumb enough to haul radioactive scrap through the Vortex Nebula," Jax replied, not even bothering to look up. He poked at a blinking light that seemed determined to win their battle of wills. Santi, the ship's comedian in residence, swung into the cockpit, holding a mug that probably used to contain coffee before it became a science experiment. "It's not all bad. I heard the radiation gives you superpowers, or cancer, one of the two." "Yeah, I'm betting on cancer," Ryler muttered, eyes fixed on the endless void beyond the cockpit glass. Space was vast, dark, and cold, kind of like his last relationship. "Anyway, let's just hope nothing else falls off the ship before we get there." As if on cue, a klaxon blared, startling the crew. "What now?" Ryler groaned, every word dripping with that special brand of enthusiasm only impending doom could inspire. Jack smacked the console, which only seemed to encourage the blaring alarm. "Distress signal, Cap, from an alien vessel. Coordinates are—" "Hell, that can't be right." Ryler narrowed his eyes. "Why's that?" Jack shrugged, a gesture that suggested he was just as bewildered as he was irritated. "Because it's coming from the middle of the vortex," Ryler sighed, rubbing his temples. "Of course it is. Why wouldn't it be?" Santi leaned against the wall, nonchalant as ever. "Hey, maybe they just need a cup of sugar, or a funeral," Jax added, ever the optimist. "Let's get eyes on it," Ryler said, flipping switches and punching buttons like a man who knew which ones to hit, mostly by accident. The main screen flickered, displaying a swirling mess of data that eventually resolved into a grainy image of a ship that looked like it had been through several wars, and possibly lost all of them. "That's the ugliest thing I've seen," Santi remarked, and Ryler could swear he saw Jax taking mental notes on how to top that design. "Send a ping back," Ryler instructed. "See if we get a response." They waited, the second stretching into a silence thicker than Santi's excuses during work hours. Finally, the console beeped. "Message incoming," Jax announced, his tone carrying the same level of enthusiasm as a man finding a snake in his boot. The voice crackling through the speakers sounded as if it were being transmitted from the bottom of a very sad well. "This is Captain Torvas of the signal crackled again. "Need immediate assistance. Engines failing. Life support." Ryler glanced at Jax, who shrugged yet again. "Could be a trap," he said, as if hoping it was so they'd have something interesting to do for once. Santi, ever the diplomat, just grinned. "Or it could be a chance to play the hero. You've been watching too many old Earth movies," Jax commented, tapping on his screen. Ryler leaned back in his chair, weighing his options. "All right, prepare to alter course. If they're lying, we get ambushed and probably die. If they're telling the truth, we get to play good Samaritans. Either way, it's more exciting than hauling scrap." The Astro Nomad groaned as it altered its course, protesting every command like a teenager being forced to mow the lawn. The ship shot forth into the Vortex Nebula, the swirling clouds of cosmic dust painting the view with various shades of "you're going to regret this." "Always wanted to die in a nebula," Santi quipped, strapping himself in. "I hear the views are killer." "That's your best one yet," Ryler said with an ironic thumbs up. "Let's just hope we don't get to see it up close." As they drew nearer, the alien vessel came into sharper focus. The thing was a patchwork monstrosity, like someone had tried to build a ship using only the parts that other ships had rejected. A fitting cousin to the Astro Nomad, really. "Hailing them again," Jax said, fingers dancing over the controls. "Let's see if they've got anything friendly to say." The same garbled voice came through, clearer now and filled with a desperation that was almost tangible. "Repeat, engines are beyond repair. Life support at 10%. Crew." I don't know about you, but I'm getting the sense that they are not bluffing, Ryler mused, scratching at the stubble on his chin. Or they're really committed to their roles, Santi suggested. You've got to admire dedication like that. We're here, Jax announced, bringing the ship to a halt, the engines whining like a toddler denied candy. Ryler took a deep breath. All right, prepare to dock, and stay sharp. If they so much as twitch wrong, we're out of here faster than a politician's promise. The crew moved with a practiced efficiency born more from necessity than any real sense of order. With a few deft maneuvers, the astro-nomad latched onto the alien ship, and the airlocks aligned with a satisfying clunk. Well, team, Ryler said, standing up and stretching his back until it popped like old bubble wrap. Let's go see what kind of mess we've got ourselves into this time. The airlock cycled open, and the crew stepped into the dimly lit corridor of the alien ship. The smell hit them first, a mix of burnt electronics and something that might have once been food, or a very unlucky crew member. Lovely place they've got here, Santi remarked, wrinkling his nose. Jack snorted. Homie, if your home's a trash compactor. They made their way to the bridge where they found Captain Torvas slumped in a chair, surrounded by a crew that looked about as lively as yesterday's leftovers. Help us, Torvas croaked, looking up with eyes that seemed to have seen one too many horrors. Ryler stepped forward, considering his options. All right, here's the deal. We help you, you don't try to kill us. Sound fair? Torvas nodded weakly. Yes, please. Well, aren't you polite? Santi said with a grin. Let's get to work then. Jax moved to the nearest console, his fingers flying over the alien interface like a pianist on speed. All right, let's see if we can't patch you up enough to limp out of here. As Jax worked, Ryler turned his attention to Torvas. So, what's your story? How'd you end up in this delightful slice of space hell? Torvas sighed, a sound like air escaping a punctured balloon. Ambushed by pirates, took everything, left us for dead. Pirates, huh? Ryler said, glancing at Jax. We know a thing or two about those bastards, don't we? Jax nodded, eyes still glued to the console. Yeah, like how they love to leave a mess for someone else to clean up. The minutes dragged on, punctuated by the occasional beep of the console and Torva's ragged breathing. Finally, Jax sat back, looking pleased with himself. Done, he announced. You're still in bad shape, but you should be able to limp to the nearest station. Thank you, Torvas said, his voice barely above a whisper. We owe you. Don't mention it, Ryler replied. Really don't, we've got a reputation to uphold. Can't have people thinking we're soft, Santi chuckled. Yeah, wouldn't want that. Ryler turned to leave but paused at the door. One more thing. You wouldn't happen to have any idea what's been causing all those weird readings near the vortex, would you? Torvas shook his head. No, but his eyes widened with sudden fear. They said something, before they left, called it the shadow, a warning. The shadow, huh? Santi said, raising an eyebrow. Sounds ominous. Sounds like a headache, Ryler corrected. Come on, let's get out of here before something else goes wrong. The crew made their way back to the astro-nomad, the alien vessel already starting to drift away, its engines sputtering and struggling to life. Well, that was fun, Jax said, resuming his place at the console. Ryler nodded, settling into his chair. Let's just hope we don't run into any surprises on the way back. The ship lurched forward, engines whining in protest as the astro-nomad turned back towards their original course, leaving the alien vessel and its haunted crew behind. I don't know about you guys, Santi said, leaning back with a content sigh, but I've had enough adventure for one day. Yeah, well, don't get too comfortable, Ryler replied, eyes flicking to the console where an ominous blinking light had just appeared. Looks like we've got company. Again, the crew's attention snapped to the sensors, which were now lighting up like a holiday celebration, except the presents were all full of doom and despair. Jack squinted at the readings. Great. Looks like someone else has an interest in the vortex. Or in us, Santi added. I told you my jokes would get us noticed someday. Ryler sighed, a resigned grin slipping across his face. All right, boys, strap in. Looks like the universe isn't done screwing with us just yet. The Astro Nomad clanked and groaned its way through the Vortex Nebula, a ship that protested every command like a dog refusing a bath. Ryler, slouched in his captain's chair, eyed the blinking lights on the console with the same enthusiasm one might have for a tax audit. "So," Santi drawled from his post, feet propped up on the dashboard like he was lounging on a beach instead of an intergalactic death trap, "any bets on who our mystery guests are? My money's on Space Jehovah's Witnesses. They've got great pamphlets." "Not that lucky," Jax replied, his fingers flying across the console like a pianist who hated music. "Reading multiple ships, fast movers. I'd say they are the welcoming committee from hell." Ryler sighed, the kind that spoke volumes about the universe's perpetual middle finger aimed squarely at him. "Of course. Why wouldn't we have company in the middle of nowhere? What's life without a little cosmic harassment?" The ship's sensors beeped like an enthusiastic car alarm on caffeine. Jack squinted at the screen, his expression souring. "Vekari," he muttered. "Ah, the Vekari," Santi said, leaning forward with a grin that could mean either I have a plan or I'm about to make things worse. "Our friendly neighborhood psychopaths, known for their charming habit of dissecting brains. Heard they make great party guests." "Yeah, well, I don't plan on letting them RSVP," Ryler snapped back. "Jax, get us out of here." Jax tapped a few more buttons, then slapped the console in frustration. "Hyperdrive's shot. Damn thing's deader than a politician's promise." "So we're sitting ducks then?" Santi asked, his humor starting to fray around the edges. "More like lame ducks," Jax corrected. "But yeah, unless someone's got a magic wand, we're stuck playing host to the Vekari." "Great," Ryler muttered, rubbing his temples as if he could massage away the incoming headache. "Just great." The Astro Nomad shuddered, a telltale sign they were being boarded. The crew exchanged looks that said everything words couldn't, mostly, were royally screwed. "All right, boys," Ryler said, standing up and checking the blaster at his hip. "Time to show these bastards what happens when they crash a human party." Santi grinned, spinning his own weapon with a flair that would have made a cowboy blush. "Can't wait to teach them some manners." The airlock hissed open and in stepped the Vekari, all sharp angles and menacing helmets like someone had given a bunch of kitchen knives legs and a grudge. The lead Vekari clicked something that translated into a voice smoother than a used car salesman's pitch. "Humans," it began, "your cognitive abilities are unique. You will come with us." Ryler shot a look at Santi. "Hear that?" "We're unique. Always knew I was special," Santi replied with a wink. "Just didn't know it was in the alien science experiment kind of way." Ryler turned back to the Vekari, his expression the very picture of "I'm not impressed." "Sorry, but we're not in the mood for abductions today. Maybe try again next century." The Vekari's head tilted, a gesture that might have been confusion or pure annoyance. "Resistance is illogical." "Funny," Jax said, leaning against the console. "That's what people used to say about disco, and yet here we are." The Vekari didn't seem to get the joke, no surprise there given their reputation for humorlessness. "Your compliance is non-negotiable," Ryler shrugged. "Well, that's a shame because we're notoriously bad at compliance." "And negotiation." The lead Vekari raised a sleek weapon, its intent clear and unfriendly. "Then we will take you by force." "Guess we get to see if Vekari bleed the same as us," Santi said, eyeing the invaders with a look that promised not fun but fury. Ryler's face hardened, humor giving way to grim determination. Jax hit the lights. With a flick of a switch, the Astro Nomad plunged into darkness, the only illumination the strobing emergency lights casting everything in alternating red and shadow. Ryler and his crew slipped into the chaos like shadows themselves, blasters at the ready. The Vekari, less accustomed to such underhanded tactics, hesitated. A mistake. Ryler took the opportunity, moving like a ghost through the dim corridor, his blaster firing with the precision of a man who'd had far too much practice at this sort of thing. Beside him, Santi was a whirlwind of movement, his shots punctuated by quips that were more for his own amusement than anything. "Hey, Vekari. Bet you didn't see this one coming." Jax, meanwhile, had taken a more subtle approach, working his way to the ship's engine room with the kind of stealth that suggested he'd spent too many years avoiding work. Once there, he began the delicate dance of rewiring, hoping to jury-rig something that might resemble a functioning hyperdrive. "Nice plan," Santi had told him earlier. "If it works, I'll buy you a drink. If not, well, I'll still buy you a drink. We'll just have to enjoy it in hell." As the fight raged on, Ryler found himself face to face with the lead Vekari. "You know," he said conversationally, "I'm not really a fan of guests who overstay their welcome." The Vekari leveled its weapon, expression inscrutable beneath its helmet. "Your humor is a flawed defense." "Then it's a good thing I've got other defenses," Ryler shot back, pulling the trigger. The Vekari staggered, its weapon clattering to the floor. Ryler didn't wait to see if it would get back up, spinning on his heel to rejoin Santi and the battle still raging. Jax's voice crackled over the ship's comms, carrying both urgency and triumph. "Hyperdrive's patched. Not pretty, but it should get us out of here." "Music to my ears," Ryler replied, dispatching another Vekari with a well-placed shot. "Get us moving, Jax, and make it fast." The astro-nomad shuddered again, this time with a purpose that suggested it might actually listen to orders for once. Ryler and Santi retreated to the bridge, their path littered with the fallen Vekari, some groaning, others very still. "Better than the gym," Santi quipped, wiping sweat from his brow. "Though the stakes are a bit higher." Ryler just grinned, adrenaline still singing in his veins. "Yeah, well, I've always said you can't beat a good cardio session." The ship lurched, engines protesting but finally acquiescing to Jax's makeshift repairs. With a roar that was more bravado than actual power, the astro-nomad jumped to light speed, leaving the Vekari ships to fume in their wake. As the stars stretched into lines of light, the crew let out a collective breath. Jax, still at the console, gave a triumphant whoop. "We did it." "The old girl's still got some life in her." "Never doubted her for a second," Santi said, collapsing into a chair with the grace of a drunken swan. Ryler just shook his head, the adrenaline finally ebbing. "Next time, let's avoid any more invitations to alien tea parties, all right?" "Yeah, next time," Jax echoed, though they all knew it would be more of the same. Trouble had a way of finding them like a dog to a bone. But that was life on the astro-nomad, a series of near misses and barely held together plans. Santi stretched, a lazy smile on his face. "So who's up for drink? I feel like we've earned it." Ryler chuckled, the tension bleeding away. "Yeah, a drink sounds about right. Just keep an eye out for any more unexpected guests." Jax nodded, already running diagnostics on the ship. "And maybe next time, Santi, try to tell a joke that doesn't involve getting us shot at." Santi grinned, unrepentant. "Where's the fun in that?" And with that, the astro-nomad shot through the void, a battered ship with a crew that was more lucky than good, but that was all right. Luck, after all, was just as unreliable as a hyperdrive on the fritz, and just as essential to keeping them one step ahead of whatever the universe decided to throw their way next. The astro-nomad was in its element, and by that, I mean it was falling apart gloriously. Every clank of metal against metal was like a symphony of doom for a ship that had seen better centuries. Ryler barely had time to appreciate the chaos as the Vekari swarmed through the corridors, their sleek forms a stark contrast to the rust bucket they invaded. "Santi," Ryler shouted over the din, "you still got that secret weapon of yours." Santi ducked behind an overturned crate, his blaster resting on his knee. "You mean my irresistible charm? Or maybe you're talking about these." He waved a couple of grenades like they were party favors. Ryler shot a Vekari that had gotten too close for comfort, the alien dropping with a clatter. "I was hoping for something more explosive." Santi grinned, tossing a grenade with the nonchalance of a man throwing peanuts to pigeons. "Oh, I've got explosive, all right. Just wait till you hear my latest joke." "Please, for the love of everything twisted, not another joke," Jax groaned through the comms, his voice crackling with the strain of holding the ship's systems together. "We're trying to repel boarders, not bore them to death." "Hey," Santi retorted, popping up to take another shot. "My jokes could be lethal, you never know." "Might be our secret weapon." A Vakari rounded the corner, weapon raised and ready to perforate anything human-shaped. But before Ryler could squeeze his trigger, Santi was on his feet, wit cocked and loaded. "So," Santi began, his voice dripping with mock seriousness, "a Vakari walks into a bar. The bartender says, 'Why the long face, get it?' Because you know they've got those weird helmets," and the Vakari stopped dead in its tracks, its weapon lowering slightly. Was it confusion, curiosity, pure bewilderment? Whatever the reason, it hesitated long enough for Ryler to blast it back to whatever twisted star it hailed from. Ryler blinked, momentarily stunned, not by the Vakari's fall but by Santi's success. "Did you just stop an alien invasion with a joke?" Santi shrugged, that infuriating grin still plastered across his face. "I tell you, humor is universal, or at least it's confusing enough to give us a fighting chance. Maybe they've never heard a joke before." "Explains their personalities," Jax chimed in, "like a funeral dirge with legs." Ryler considered it, head tilted as he fired another shot down the corridor. "All right, Santi, give it another whirl. Maybe laughter really is the best medicine, or at least a distraction." Santi stood, arms outstretched like a magician preparing for his final act. "Ladies and, well, mostly lethal aliens, time for some stand-up. Why don't Vakari play hide and seek?" "Because good luck hiding those egos." There it was again. A beat, a pause, a collective head tilt from the advancing Vakari, their alien brains trying to process this most human of weapons, humor. Taking advantage of their confusion, Ryler and Santi pressed the attack, their blasters roaring to life in the flickering red gloom. It was working in a way. The Vakari were hesitating, if only for a moment. But with each shot fired, Ryler couldn't help but wonder, what if this insane plan actually worked? Jax's voice crackled back over the comms, all business despite the chaos. "I've rerouted the power, but the hyperdrive's still a mess. We're talking last season's fashion, sort of outdated." "Do what you can," Ryler snapped, firing another shot that clipped the shoulder of a Vakari who'd crept too close. "We need out of here before they regroup." Santi, still riffing like his life depended on it, which it probably did, was in rare form. "Why did the Vakari cross the galaxy? To say hello to our lovely brains." The Vakari, still unsure whether to shoot or laugh, or whatever it was they did, were the perfect targets, and Ryler wasn't about to waste that advantage. His shots were precise, efficient, each one a reminder that while humor might be new to the Vakari, violence was a universal language he spoke fluently. "Santi's humor's got them on the ropes," Ryler said, ducking a blast that scorched the bulkhead. "But this only buys us time." "More time than we had before," Santi pointed out, his next joke ready. "What do you call a Vakari with a dictionary?" Enlightened, Jax, somewhere in the bowels of the ship, let out a snort. "If this works, you owe me a drink. Hell, if this doesn't work, you still owe me a drink." Ryler grunted his agreement, firing again and watching as the Vakari crumpled, their hesitance proving to be their undoing. "All right, Santi, keep it up. Let's see if you can't confuse them all the way back through the airlock." "Never thought I'd use comedy as a weapon," Santi mused, ducking as a stray shot whizzed past. "Guess there's a first time for everything." The Vakari were regrouping, perhaps realizing that the humans' insanity was a greater threat than they'd anticipated. But for now, they were on the back foot, and any advantage had to be taken. Ryler moved to the next corridor, Santi at his side, blasters ready and jokes loaded. Each footstep echoed with the knowledge that they were barely holding this together. But that was life on the Astro-Nomad, held together by scrap metal, half-baked plans, and now, apparently, a sense of humor. "Hey, Vakari," Santi called out, voice ringing through the corridors. "Why do you never see a Vakari breakdancing?" "Because they can't get over themselves." The lead Vakari hesitated, its own weapon wavering. Ryler seized the moment, diving for cover as he fired. Everything was chaos, a whirl of sound and movement, yet beneath it all was that nagging thought. What if humor really was their strongest weapon? Jax's voice cut through the comms, a lifeline in the madness. "Ryler, if you've got any more miracles up your sleeve, now's the time. Hyperdrive's as ready as it's gonna get." "Music to my ears," Ryler replied, the words a promise and a curse. "Get us out of here, Jax, before the Vekari decide to stop laughing." The astro-nomad shuddered, the engines groaning like they were being asked to do the impossible, which they probably were. But slowly, surely, the ship began to move, inching toward escape with all the grace of a drunk trying to navigate stairs. Santi was still at it, his voice a constant stream of nonsensical humor that somehow, miraculously, kept the Vekari off balance. Why do Vekari never tell jokes? Because they always go over their heads. Ryler could almost see the Vekari's collective confusion, their mission derailed by something as simple as humor. They hesitated, weapons lowering ever so slightly, and that was all Ryler needed. "Time to go," Ryler barked, grabbing Santi by the collar and dragging him toward the bridge. Jax hit it, the astro-nomad lurched, the hyperdrive kicking in with a shudder that suggested it might fall apart at any second. But it held, and with a roar that was more defiant than powerful, the ship leaped into the void, leaving the Vekari far behind. Silence fell, broken only by the hum of the ship and their own breathing. Ryler let out a long breath, the tension bleeding away. "Remind me never to doubt the power of bad jokes again," Santi grinned, collapsing into a chair with a chuckle. "Guess we've found our secret weapon, huh? Next time maybe I'll try a limerick." Jax appeared from the corridor, grease-smeared but victorious. "I'm just glad it worked. Next time, though, let's try not to need a stand-up routine to save our skins." Ryler nodded, exhaustion catching up with him now that the adrenaline had faded. "Agreed, but if nothing else, we've learned one thing today. That Vekari have no sense of humor," Santi suggested, still grinning like a madman. "That they have no defense against it," Ryler corrected. "And that might be the one edge we have." The trio settled into the bridge, the astro-nomad hurtling through space, battered but unbeaten. They were safe for now, but the galaxy was vast and filled with threats, enemies who wouldn't be disarmed by jokes. Yet for this moment they were alive, and that was something. "So, about that drink," Santi said, breaking the silence with that same irrepressible humor. "Yeah," Ryler agreed, a rare smile breaking through. "Yeah, I think we've earned it." As the stars blurred past, the crew of the astro-nomad knew they'd face danger again, and probably sooner than they'd like. But for now, they'd toast to the strangest victory imaginable, a victory won with humor and humanity in a universe that seemed hell-bent on taking itself too seriously. And somewhere in the dark, the Vekari would be nursing their wounds, and wondering how the hell they'd been bested by bad jokes. The astro-nomad limped through space like a brawler staggering away from an alley fight, the vortex nebula wrapping them in its toxic embrace yet again. Ryler leaned back in his chair, the faint whine of the engines a soothing reminder that they were still alive. For now. "Anyone else feel like we've just escaped death by the skin of our teeth?" Jax muttered, wiping a smear of grease from his forehead with a rag that looked like it had seen better days, somewhere in the last century. "You mean like every other day on this scrap heap?" Ryler quipped, casting a sidelong glance at Santi, who was busy trying to make a vending machine cough up a can of synthesized beer. The machine rattled ominously, creaking like it might give up and dispense something poisonous. Santi grinned, the kind of grin that suggested he might just laugh in the face of his own funeral. "I don't know, Jax. A bit of excitement's good for the soul, or what's left of it after our last escapade." Jax rolled his eyes, turning his attention back to the console. The screen flickered, a mottled mess of static and remaining functionality. "Well, our hyperdrives held together with hopes and duct tape, and we're running low on both." "Nothing new there," Ryler said with a sigh. "If it's not falling apart, it's probably out of stock." "Speaking of stock," Santi said, finally managing to dislodge a can with a heroic clatter, "we might want to think about stocking up on some new jokes." "If that's what's keeping us alive, we're in bad shape," Ryler chuckled, a dry sound in the recycled air. We've found our secret weapon, and it's your terrible sense of humor. Who would have thought? Santi shrugged, popping the tab with a fizz. Turns out the Vicari don't know whether to shoot us or invite us to a comedy club. Maybe we should start selling tickets. Good luck monetizing that, Jack snorted, fiddling with a wire that sparked in indignation. But we could try to refine it, see just how deep this tactic can go. Ryler considered it, his mind turning over the possibilities. You think it's just the jokes, or is it something more? We might have hit on something. Well, if laughter's a universal language, then maybe it screws with their brains, Santi suggested, raising his can in a mock toast. Here's to human ingenuity, or insanity, whichever gets us through the day. A beep drew their attention back to the console. Ryler eyed it warily, half expecting it to deliver more bad news. What is it this time? Jax glanced over the readout, squinting at the blinking lights. Looks like the Vicari are regrouping. We're not done with them yet. Figures, Ryler muttered. And we're flying on borrowed time. So we double down on what works, Santi said, his eyes gleaming with mischief. We keep them laughing and off balance until we figure out how to use it to our full advantage. Do we even know why it works? Ryler asked, skepticism lacing his voice. I mean, sure, jokes are a distraction, but this feels more targeted. Jax tapped his chin, a smirk playing on his lips. Maybe it's like a virus. Our humor is infecting them, messing with their neural sync. They've never had to deal with our level of stupidity before. I prefer to call it ingenuity, Santi corrected with a wink. We're pioneers, damn it. Name one pioneer who's made it out alive, Jax countered, shaking his head. Besides, we're not exactly equipped to run a scientific study here. But we know it works, Ryler said, leaning forward. We just need to make it work better. If laughter's disrupting them, maybe we can push it further. So, what do? Make them laugh harder, Santi mused, his expression thoughtful. Maybe it's about the timing, hit them with punchlines when they least expect it. Ryler nodded slowly, the pieces falling into place. We'll need more than jokes, we need variety. Maybe music, visuals, something that keeps them spinning. Jax chuckled darkly. You're suggesting we turn this ship into a flying circus? Why not? Santi said, standing and spreading his arms wide. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the ultimate show, where our lives are the main attraction. Ryler snorted, a reluctant smile tugging at his lips. If we survive, we might just earn a reputation. The crew that fought off an invasion with punchlines. Their banter was cut short by another beep from the console, this time more insistent. Jax's face fell. Ryler, looks like the Vicaris regrouped faster than expected. They're heading our way. Ryler's smile evaporated, replaced by a grim determination. Then we'd better get ready. Santi prepped the stand-up. Santi saluted with mock seriousness, his eyes alight with manic energy. Operation Laughter is a go. I'll have them rolling in the aisles or whatever they've got. Ryler moved to the weapons console, his fingers dancing over the controls. Jax, how's the hyperdrive? Can it take another jump? Jax hesitated, his face a picture of skepticism. It'll take it. Question is, will we still have a ship afterward? One problem at a time, Ryler said, his voice carrying the weight of a man used to dealing with never-ending catastrophes. Santi, you're up. Santi stepped forward, the corridors of the Astronome at his stage. All right, Vicari, here's a classic. A Vicari, a human, and a Martian walk into a bar. Bartender says, "What is this, a joke?" The Vicari, advancing with all the precision of a well-oiled machine, hesitated. Just for a beat, a moment of confusion rippling through their ranks. See, that's the thing about space, Santi continued, the rhythm of his voice carrying through the ship. It's vast, it's dangerous, and it's full of things that'll kill you. But at least it's never boring. The Vicari paused again, their neural synchronization faltering like a malfunctioning machine. Ryler watched, his grip on the blaster firm. Keep going, Santi, you're getting to them. Jax nodded approvingly, his eyes flicking between the console and the impending threat. It's working. Their signals are all over the place. Santi grinned, leaning into the absurdity of it all. Why don't Vakari ever play chess? Because they can't stand the thought of a pawn outsmarting them. Another ripple of hesitation, another chink in the Vakari's formidable armor. Ryler seized the opportunity, firing off a volley of shots that sent the nearest invaders sprawling. "We need to find a way to make this more permanent," Ryler barked, reloading. "If we can destabilize them longer, we might get out of this alive." Jax's fingers danced over the controls, his mind racing. "If humor's the virus, we need a way to spread it faster, deeper." Santi's eyes sparkled with inspiration. "What about broadcast? We rig the comms to send out a loop of jokes, music, whatever we've got. Hit them from all sides." Ryler nodded, his mind already calculating the odds. "It's a long shot, but it's better than waiting to be overwhelmed." Jax set to work, fingers moving with practiced ease over the console. "I'll need a few minutes. Keep them busy until I'm done." "Minutes we might not have," Ryler muttered, but there was no time for doubt. "Santi, keep up the pressure." Santi nodded, throwing himself into his routine with the reckless abandon of a man who realized his life depended on laughter. "What do you call a Vakari who's bad at math?" "A tragedy waiting to happen." The Vakari stumbled, caught between their mission and the unexpected barrage of humor. Their coordination faltered, giving Ryler and Santi a narrow window to strike. Jax cursed under his breath, wires sparking as he worked to reroute the ship's communications. "Almost got it. Just hold them a little longer." Santi's confidence never wavered, his voice a constant stream of insanity. "Why did the Vakari get kicked out of the space bar? Because they kept taking everything too literally." Ryler fired again, each shot a calculated strike against their wavering foes. They needed more time, just a few precious seconds more. Finally, Jax punched a final command into the console. "Got it. Broadcasting now." The ship's speakers crackled to life, filling the corridors with a cacophony of sound, jokes, music, nonsensical chatter. The Vakari reeled, their neural synchronization shattered by the onslaught of distinctly human chaos. Ryler saw the effect immediately, the invaders stumbling like marionettes with tangled strings. "It's working. It's actually working." Santi whooped, pumping a fist into the air. "We're the punchline to the galaxy's worst joke, and it's beautiful." Their victory, however temporary, was a testament to the sheer madness of survival. But the fight was far from over. As the Vakari retreated, regrouping to counter this unexpected threat, Ryler knew their respite was fleeting. "We'll need a new plan once they figure this out," Jax warned, his eyes scanning the console for threats. "They're not going to stay confused forever." Ryler nodded, his mind already racing ahead. "For now, we've bought ourselves time. We need to get the hyperdrive ready for another jump." "Already on it," Jax replied, a hint of resolve coloring his voice. "It'll be a rough ride, but I'll get us out." Santi leaned back, wiping sweat from his brow. "I think we're starting a new trend, comedy warfare." "Who'd have thought?" The astro-nomad shuddered as the hyperdrive spooled up, the ship vibrating with barely contained power. Ryler took a deep breath, his gaze meeting Santi's. "Ready for round two?" Santi grinned, the kind of grin that suggested he might be slightly unhinged. "Born ready. Let's see if we can make the universe laugh with us instead of at us." As the ship surged forward, the stars blurring into streaks of light, Ryler allowed himself a brief moment of hope. They'd survived another day, against improbable odds, using humor as their shield. But as they hurtled toward the unknown, one thought lingered in his mind. In a galaxy of enemies and uncertainty, they'd found a weapon no one had predicted. And maybe, just maybe, it would be enough to see them through the darkness. Ryler gazed out the viewport, the vortex nebula swirling like a bad acid trip mixed with a cosmic blender. It was pretty, sure, if you liked your beauty with a side of impending doom. "So, Jax, how's the hyperdrive looking? Ready for another one of our daring, completely sane jumps?" Jax was hunched over the console, a grimace etched into his face like he was constipated with 12 different problems. "Define ready." "If you mean ready to explode and kill us all, then yeah, it's ready." Santi, still high off his comedic victory, sauntered over, a grin plastered on his face so wide it could bridge galaxies. "Cheer up, Jax. Maybe the explosion will finally rid us of this god-awful vending machine." Nothing like a good all-death wish to lighten the mood. Jax rolled his eyes, his fingers tapping the console with the desperation of a man at a slot machine, hoping for a last-minute jackpot. "I'm not sure if the vending machine or the Vakari are more of a threat at this point." Ryler chuckled, though it sounded more like the death rattle of a man who knew the universe had him on speed dial for every misfortune hotline. "Let's focus on the Vakari, eh? At least their heads are squishier." The ship groaned, a sound that echoed through its battered body, promising more hardships with every shudder. The Vakari weren't backing down, no surprise there. Dogged persistence was their thing. That and brain dissections, apparently. "Look alive, gents," Ryler muttered, gripping the weapon's console like it was a cheap whiskey bottle in a crisis. "Our humor might have bought us some time, but it's time to get serious." "Serious?" Santi laughed, incredulous. "Ryler, when the hell have we ever been serious about anything?" "Right, sorry," Ryler corrected, raising an eyebrow. "Let's get sarcastically serious." Jax cracked a half-smile, though it seemed to hurt. "This is why we can't have nice things. Because every time we're about to die, you two start with the stand-up routine." The proximity alarm blared, a screaming reminder that the universe was coming in for another round of Let's Make Life Hell. Ryler cursed, flicking controls like he was playing an old-school arcade game, mostly luck, little skill. "Vakari inbound," Ryler barked, his voice tight. "Looks like they're tired of jokes. They're going for a hands-on demonstration of their hatred." Santi smirked, but it was forced, like a comedian bombing on stage. "Maybe they just want an autograph. Or the pleasure of watching us implode," Jax added, gritting his teeth as he wrenched a panel open, sparks showering down like fireworks on a particularly bad holiday. Ryler grimaced, firing off a volley at the nearest Vakari craft. "I didn't think it was possible, but I think I hate them more than space taxes." The ship shook violently, throwing Santi against the wall. He let out a groan that was half pain, half resignation. "Good news, the vending machines finally dispensed my beer. Bad news, Vakari are trying to make it my last drink." Jax glanced over, worry etched across his normally cool demeanor. "Santi, get up. We need all hands if we're going to survive this." Santi staggered to his feet, rubbing the back of his head. "If this is my farewell tour, I demand better lighting." Ryler fired again, each shot a desperate plea to whatever cosmic entity might be listening. "Jax, how's that hyperdrive looking?" Jax didn't answer immediately, his focus consumed by the mess of wires in front of him. "It'll hold, probably. Maybe. Just avoid any sudden stops or, using it." "Just like my last girlfriend," Santi quipped, trying to keep the mood from going entirely graveyard. Another blast rocked the Astro Nomad and Ryler cursed. "These bastards don't quit, do they?" "Nope," Jax replied, his fingers dancing over the console like a pianist at a particularly disastrous concert. "They are persistent. Like a bad rash." Santi snorted, then winced. Humor apparently didn't mix well with head injuries. "I think I need a refund on this whole heroic space adventure. I signed up for the glamour, not imminent death." The ship lurched again, and Jax was thrown back, his head meeting the floor with a sickening thud. Ryler glanced over, panic flickering through his usually controlled exterior. Jax didn't move, and the situation took on a new level of dire. Ryler's stomach clenched, the way it did when he realized he'd just eaten expired rations. "Santi, get over here, check him." Santi stumbled over, his face a mask of concern. "Jax, buddy, you still with us?" Jax groaned, a low, pained sound that resonated more with defeat than anything else. Yeah. Just needed a nap." "Bad time for beauty sleep, man," Ryler said, trying to inject some levity into a situation that was rapidly spiraling into disaster. Jax tried to sit up, wincing as he touched the growing bump on his head. "Hyperdrive's shot. Best we can do is keep the ship from splitting in two." Ryler felt that familiar gnawing pit of despair, the one that accompanied so many of their near-death experiences. "Right, because that's all we needed. A ship that's one sneeze away from disintegration. Santi looked between them, his expression a mixture of fear and determination. What are the odds we can still make it out of this? Better than winning the lottery. Worse than avoiding that vending machine, Ryler replied, tightening his grip on the weapon controls. Jax forced a smile, though it was strained, the kind of smile you wear when you're trying not to vomit from pain. Guess we'll have to improvise. Maybe the Vekari will be impressed by our sheer stupidity. Impressed or terrified. Maybe both, Santi added, trying to keep the mood light despite the encroaching doom. Ryler nodded, firing off another desperate volley. One thing's for sure, we're not going down without making this the most obnoxious battle they've ever fought. The Vekari bore down on them, unrelenting, their ships weaving through the nebula with precision and malice. The Astro-Nomad, held together by duct tape, outdated promises, and the sheer stubbornness of its crew, was pushed to its limits. The console beeped ominously, a harbinger of more bad news. Ryler didn't even bother to glance at it. Santi, any chance you've got another miracle up your sleeve? Santi shook his head, looking more like a man at the end of his tether than ever before. I think I used up my lifetime supply of miracles. All I've got left are bad jokes. Jack struggled to his feet, leaning heavily on the console. His voice was tight, carrying the weight of someone who'd seen the end and decided to flip it off anyway. Then let's make them count. Ryler fired again, the ship shuddering under the strain. Let's give them hell then. Santi took a deep breath, his voice cutting through the chaos like a razor. Why did the Vekari cross the galaxy? To find some humor, because their sense of humor is as dead as their taste buds. The Vekari hesitated, a flicker of confusion rippling through their ranks. It wasn't much, but it was enough for Ryler, who capitalized on the opening with a fierce determination. Jax was back at the console, his fingers a blur. We might not make it, but I'll be damned if we don't make them regret ever tangling with us. Santi grinned, though it was more a baring of teeth than anything else. Remember, it's not over until the fat lady sings, or in this case, until the whole ship explodes. The Vekari ships closed in, relentless, and the crew of the Astro-Nomad prepared to make their final stand. The outcome was uncertain, hope was dwindling, but if they were going to go down, they'd do it with style, one quip, one joke, and one last desperate gamble at a time. Ryler fired again, the ship's systems groaning in protest. I'll miss this rust bucket when it's gone. You and me both, Jax said, his voice carrying the affectionate tone of a man who'd never admit he loved anything as much as he loved this ship. Santi clapped a hand on Ryler's shoulder, his expression one of camaraderie and shared insanity. Let's make our last laugh a real bellybuster. The ship roared into action, a final act of defiance against the inevitable. As the Vekari closed in, ready for their final assault, the crew of the Astro-Nomad prepared to give them the best damn show the universe had ever seen. Ryler slammed his fist into the console, the ship groaning in sympathetic agony. Damn it, we're out of options, and our biting wit isn't cutting it with the Vekari anymore. Santi, ever the optimist, leaned against the wall, eyes sparkling with mischief despite the situation. Maybe it's time we try something truly revolutionary. You know, break new ground with an act so insane it might just work. Jax, rubbing his sore head, raised an eyebrow. You got a magic trick up your sleeve, Santi, because unless you can pull a fleet of battlecruisers out of your ass, I'm not holding my breath. No battlecruisers, Santi admitted, scratching his chin thoughtfully. But what about a little comedy? Ryler blinked, certain he'd misheard. You want to crack jokes while they crack our skulls? Santi threw his hands up dramatically. Think about it. A recorded comedy routine, broadcasted across all channels before they vaporize us. It's a long shot, but maybe it'll confuse them, or at least buy us a few extra seconds to figure out how we want to die. Jax shook his head, but there was a hint of a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. This is either the dumbest idea or the most brilliant one we've ever had. Probably both. Ryler, still wary, leaned back in his chair, the synthetic leather creaking. So we distract them with humor while we— What exactly? Pray a miracle drops out of the nebula. Exactly, Santi said, clapping his hands together like a kid with a new toy. I've always wanted to die doing what I love. And if that doesn't work, well, at least we'll go out with a bang and a laugh. Jax exhaled, long and slow, as if preparing himself for the inevitable fall off the sanity cliff they were about to dive from. What's this world come to when our best hope is making the enemy laugh themselves into a stupor? Ryler nodded, a reluctant grin spreading across his face. All right, I'm in. Let's throw them a curveball they won't see coming. Santi's grin widened, if that was possible without his face splitting in half. Perfect. I've got just the thing recorded from that gig on Zenter Prime. They might not laugh, but we'll sure as hell get their attention. Jack snorted. Yeah, your jokes will either confuse them or convince them we've truly lost it. Win-win. The Vicari ships were closing in, their sleek silver hulls like blades against the swirling backdrop of the nebula. Their intentions were clear and humorless. Ryler flicked a few switches, his brow furrowed in concentration. All right, let's get this show on the road. Santi, cue up your comedy act. Jax, keep an eye on the console. If anything looks like it's going to explode, let me know. Jax saluted lazily, a smirk playing on his lips. Because I didn't have enough to worry about, now I've got to critique Santi's stand-up routine. Santi punched a few buttons, the hum of the ship mingling with the crackle of static before the recording started. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen and assorted spacefaring entities, to the greatest comedy show this side of the galaxy. Ryler rolled his eyes, letting out a chuckle. I can't believe this is our grand strategy. The universe has a twisted sense of humor. Or maybe just us, Jax replied, eyes scanning the console like a hawk. Let's hope the Vicari have a similar taste. The recorded voice of Santi carried through the ship, his jokes punctuated by the occasional laugh track. You know, space travel is a lot like dating. You think you're going somewhere amazing, but all you end up with is a void of nothingness. Jack snorted, unable to resist the pull of Santi's humor. Void of nothingness. Sounds like our current predicament. The Vicari ships wavered, their formation shifting slightly as if to say, what the hell is this? Santi chuckled, his voice smooth and confident. I once dated a girl from the planet Clyron, beautiful but a bit too clingy. Had to break it off, or more accurately, blast it off with a plasma cannon. Ryler shook his head, firing off another round at the Vicari. If we survive this, remind me to never let you date again. Jax grinned, fiddling with the power distribution to keep the shields up. Can't deny it, Santi's got them pausing. Maybe the absurdity of it all has them revising their tactics. The Vicari ships hesitated, giving the astro-nomad a much-needed breather. Ryler took the opportunity to adjust their course slightly, keeping the ship within the swirling chaos of the nebula, covering them like a cosmic cloak. Santi's voice continued to play, a lifeline of laughter in the darkness. A Vicari walks into a bar and orders a drink. Bartender says, sorry, we don't serve your kind here. Try the dissection table next door. There it was, an unmistakable tremor of uncertainty among the enemy ships. The Vicari, it seemed, were not immune to confusion or hesitation. Maybe they did have a sense of humor, albeit a deeply buried one. Ryler barked out a laugh, incredulous. I think it's working. They're holding back. Or they're debating the etiquette of dissecting comedians, Jax added dryly. As Santi's jokes emboldened the crew, the Vicari ships momentarily broke formation. It was a small victory, but in the vast emptiness of space, small victories meant everything. Ryler seized the opportunity, his fingers dancing over the controls. All right, let's use this to get some breathing room. Jax, how's our speed? Jax grimaced, glancing at the hyperdrive controls. We can push a bit more, but anything too drastic and we'll blow ourselves to pieces. Just like your last attempt at cooking, Santi quipped, fingers still flying over the console as he managed the broadcast. Hey, that soup had character, Jax protested, feigning indignation. Yeah, like our current situation, more than enough character for one day. Ryler smirked, adjusting their trajectory slightly to weave through the nebula. Santi's routine continued, jokes echoing through the cosmos. Why did the human cross the galaxy? To get away from the damn Vekari, obviously. The Vekari were at a standstill, the ships clearly deliberating over the unanticipated spectacle. Whether they were strategizing or just utterly bewildered, the crew of the Astro Nomad had bought themselves some time. Jax tapped a few more commands, the ship shuddering but holding steady. I don't know how long this will last, but let's make the most of it. Ryler nodded, the weight of leadership heavy on his shoulders. We need a plan. Santi, any more genius ideas? Santi shrugged, still grinning like a madman. If all else fails, we could try throwing the vending machine at them. Might not win the fight, but it'd be great for morale. Right, Ryler said. Well, keep the jokes coming, we'll need every second. Jax checked the systems, his expression solemn. Shields are at 60%, if they regroup and attack, we're done for. Then let's hope they have a long debate, Santi replied, the recording reaching another punchline. You ever notice how space battles are a lot like family dinners? Loud, chaotic, and someone always leaves in a huff. Ryler chuckled, the tension in his muscles loosening just a bit. I never thought I'd say this, but thank the stars for your terrible jokes, Santi. Hey, terrible is subjective, Santi shot back, clearly enjoying himself despite the circumstance. Besides, it's working, isn't it? The Vekari ships circled like sharks, wary of the bizarre performance. Yet they kept their distance, granting the Astro Nomad a sliver of hope. Jax ran a hand through his hair, his eyes scanning the console for any sign of reprieve. If we can just make it to the edge of the nebula, we might be able to jump clear before they realize what hit them. And here I thought you'd given up on miracles, Ryler said, his voice laced with irony. Miracles are just highly improbable events, Jax replied with a shrug. And this whole situation qualifies as highly improbable. Santi's routine hit another high note. And what's with the Vekari obsession with dissecting brains? Look, guys, if you need help with yours, just ask. We'll lend you a brain cell or two. The Vekari ships wobbled, indecision evident in their movements. They hadn't expected an enemy to deploy humor as a weapon, and it was clearly throwing them off their game. Ryler kept the ship steady, his mind racing. All right, let's make for the nebula's edge. Santi, keep them entertained. Jax, prepare whatever's left of the hyperdrive for a jump. Jax's fingers flew over the controls, every tap a prayer that the ship would hold together. We're cutting it close, but if Santi keeps yapping, maybe they won't notice us slipping away. Santi nodded, determination in his eyes. Don't worry, I've got enough material to last us a few more light years. Ryler steered the ship, every maneuver precise, the nebula's chaotic energy enveloping them. Let's just hope they keep laughing, or whatever the Vekari equivalent is. The Vekari ships hovered, their formation uneasy. The comedy routine was a wild card they hadn't planned for, and it showed. As the Astro Nomad crept toward the nebula's edge, the tension was palpable. Ryler could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, but he refused to let it break him. They were so close. Jax's gaze was glued to the console, calculating every risk. We're almost there. Just a bit more and we can shake them. Ryler nodded, his focus unyielding. Let's do this. Santi, give it your all. Santi saluted, the recording hitting its final stretch. Remember, folks, even in the darkest of times, there's always room for a little laughter. And if not, well, you can always dissect the punchline. The Vekari hovered, their ships bobbing uncertainly. Whatever internal debate raged among them, it stalled their approach. Jax's hands moved with precision, setting the hyperdrive for what was likely a one-way trip. Ready when you are, Ryler. Ryler took a deep breath, his hand hovering over the jump controls. Here we go. Hold on tight and pray our luck holds. With a final nod to his crew, Ryler initiated the jump. The ship lurched as the hyperdrive roared to life, propelling them toward the nebula's edge and beyond. The Vekari ships, caught off guard by the sudden move, hesitated just long enough for the Astro Nomad to vanish into the ether, their laughter echoing in the silence of space. As the stars streaked past, Ryler allowed himself a small, relieved grin. Well, that was something. Yeah, Jack said, slumping back in his seat, exhaustion etched into his features. We should try dying dramatically more often, Santi chuckled, his eyes twinkling with triumph. Next time I'm bringing a bigger audience. The ship held together, against all odds, propelled by humor, desperation, and sheer, stubborn willpower. As the Vekari faded into the distance, the crew of the Astro-Nomad savored their improbable escape, knowing full well that while they'd cheated death today, tomorrow was another story entirely. The Astro-Nomad rattled through the tempestuous nebula like a tin can tied to the bumper of a honeymoon shuttle, barely keeping its guts from spilling out. Ryler sat tense in the captain's chair, his fingers tapping a frenzied drum solo on the armrests. Jax, tell me we're still in one piece. Jax, the ship's reluctant optimist and part-time miracle worker, grunted as he scanned the readouts on the console. One piece. Sure, if you're okay with that piece being mostly duct tape and prayers. Santi, the perpetual jester, leaned back in his chair, casually tossing a stress ball from hand to hand. Hey, as long as it doesn't end in a fiery explosion, I'm counting it as a win. Fiery explosions are overrated anyway, Ryler replied, squinting at the display that painted a grim picture of their current fuel reserves, dismal at best. Santi, keep the hilarity coming. They seem to be enjoying the cosmic comedic review. Santi grinned, already composing his next set. Why did the Vekari ship cross the nebula? To get to the other void? Jack snorted, adjusting the ship's trajectory. If this doesn't work, we're going to be the punchline. Outside, the swirling chaos of the Vortex Nebula provided a spectacular backdrop. It was like they were riding through the digestive tract of some cosmic entity, complete with all the belches and gurgles. The Vekari ships, typically unwavering in their pursuit, hovered with an uncharacteristic indecision. It was as if the concept of humor had short-circuited their collective neural network. Ryler used the opportunity to redirect power to the shields. Look, if we can just buy ourselves more time, we might actually pull this off. Yeah, because hoping has always been our top strategy, Jax remarked, his voice oozing with sarcasm. Santi flipped a switch, sending another wave of jokes through the ether. You know, they say laughter is the best medicine. Let's hope it's also the best defense against brain-hungry aliens. The Vekari, those notorious brain dissection enthusiasts, seemed genuinely baffled by the crew's antics. Their ships bobbed uncertainly, like a group of schoolyard bullies suddenly asked to perform stand-up. For the first time, the predatory gaze of their ships seemed less focused, as if they'd been derailed by the absurdity of it all. Ryler tapped into this unexpected advantage. If we can keep them distracted, we might be able to slip past. Jax, any chance we can coax the hyperdrive into one last miracle? I've coaxed, pleaded, and outright begged, Jax replied, hands flying over the console, but it might need a blood sacrifice at this point. I nominate the vending machine, Santi chimed in. Probably cursed anyway. Ryler chuckled, though it was more nerves than humor. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if that thing was haunted. I swear it's been giving me the evil eye since we left port. The ship shuddered as it hit another rough patch in the nebula, the hull groaning in protest. Ryler gritted his teeth. Keep it steady, Jax. Just a little further and we'll be clear. Jax nodded, not taking his eyes off the controls. Yeah, sure. Just keep telling yourself that we're not about to become space debris. Santi's voice piped up again, unfazed by the chaos. What do you call a Vekari who can't catch a human, out of work? Ryler shot him a glance. You're on fire today, Santi. Just don't burn us all down with you. The Vekari ships, still disoriented by the onslaught of humor, drifted apart slightly. The Astro-Nomad dipped and weaved through the nebula, shifting like a shadow through fog. Every joke seemed to buy them just a little more time, space, and hope. Incredible, Jax muttered. I never thought I'd see the day we'd escape certain death with comedy. Shows what I know. Ryler snorted. It's either genius or the universe's biggest joke on us, and I don't care which as long as we get out of this alive. Santi's routine hit another crescendo. If we survive this, drinks are on me at the next spaceport, assuming we make it to a spaceport that isn't a smoking crater. That's the spirit, Ryler said. Keep the optimism flowing, Santi. It's probably the only thing keeping us afloat. The Vicari, still sluggish from the unexpected encounter, began to fall behind. The astro-nomad edged closer to the nebula's fringes, the chaotic energy diminishing into the relative calm of open space. "We're almost there," Jax announced, breathless with the effort of keeping the ship from tearing apart under the stress. Ryler nodded, directing every ounce of willpower into one last push. "Hold on, everyone. One more burst should do it." With a jolt that rattled their bones, the astro-nomad broke free from the nebula's grasp, sailing into the vast emptiness beyond. The Vicari hesitated at the threshold, their ships wavering as if second-guessing the pursuit. Santi paused the broadcast, killing the jokes with a flick of a switch. The sudden silence was almost jarring. "Well, I guess that's a wrap on tonight's show. Hope you enjoyed the comedy special." Jax exhaled, a shaky laugh escaping his lips. "You know, I'll never look at a stand-up routine the same way again." Ryler allowed himself a rare smile, the tension easing from his body. "I think we all deserve a medal for this insanity. Or a stiff drink," Jax added. "Preferably one that doesn't taste like engine coolant." The Vicari ships, momentarily outmaneuvered, hovered at a distance, clearly reconsidering their options. It was a small victory, but one that felt monumental given the circumstances. Ryler adjusted their course, setting a trajectory for the nearest safe zone. "We're not out of the woods yet, but at least we've put some distance between us and them." Santi leaned back, a satisfied grin plastered across his face. "I'd call that a success. And to think, all it took was a little humor and a lot of reckless bravery." "Reckless bravery is pretty much our calling card at this point," Jax remarked, shaking his head. "And somehow it keeps working." The ship drifted through space, the tension of the chase slowly dissipating. In the silence that followed, the crew dared to hope that perhaps they'd done the impossible, escaped certain doom armed only with wit and a healthy dose of madness. Ryler stared out at the stars, his mind still racing. "We'll have to lay low for a while. The Vicari won't forget this, and I doubt they'll be laughing next time." Santi shrugged, unfazed. "Then we'll just have to come up with a new act. I've got plenty of material." Jax laughed, the sound a mixture of exhaustion and relief. "Let's just hope we're not the punchline in the end." As the astro-nomad sailed into the unknown, its crew savored the victory, however fleeting. They were alive for now, and that was enough. After all, in the vast cosmos where death lurked behind every asteroid, laughter wasn't just the best medicine. It was a lifeline. The astro-nomad drifted in space like a befuddled goose that somehow managed to avoid a hunter's shotgun blast. Ryler half expected the ship to fall apart now that the adrenaline had faded, but it hung together with an obstinacy that would make a mule proud. "Think the Vicari have finally got their fill of comedy for today?" Santi asked, leaning back with a satisfied smirk, his feet casually crossed on the dashboard. "They were probably just pissed we didn't give them a 2-drink minimum," Jax replied. He squinted at a flickering console, which seemed to be considering whether or not it should explode out of spite. "And speaking of drinks, I could use one. Something to wash down that healthy near-death experience." Ryler let out a slow breath, the tension seeping from his shoulders. "That was a close one, but don't get too comfortable. We're still a floating tin can without a functioning hyperdrive, and I'm pretty sure we've got more duct tape than hull integrity at this point. Good thing duct tape solves 90% of our problems," Jax noted, tapping the console, as if a little encouragement might persuade it to behave. Santi rolled his eyes. "And for the other 10%, we have dark humor and sheer dumb luck." Ryler stood up, stretching his legs with a groan. "All right, we need to patch this bird up before we transmit our little comedy special back to Earth." "Ah, the motherland," Santi sighed, dreaming. Can't wait to tell them how we turned an alien death trap into an open mic night, Jack snorted. Knowing our luck, they'll just ask if we recorded it for posterity. With a nod, Ryler headed towards the engine room, the air filled with the comforting hum of the ship's life support systems, which, if the universe had any sense of humor, would probably pack up and leave next. As he entered the engine room, the smell of burnt wiring hit him like a bad joke. "Jax, how bad is it?" Ryler called, his voice echoing in the metallic space. Jax followed him in, squinting at the jumble of wires and circuits that constituted their hyperdrive. "Well, the good news is it's still not on fire. The bad news is it wants to be." "Great," Ryler muttered, rubbing his temples. "We're going to need more than spit and prayers this time. Maybe a little muscle too," Santi said, joining them, his hands tucked behind his head. "Think we can lift it with our collective willpower?" "We'll need more than that," Ryler said, inspecting the mess. "Jax, think you can get it running again?" "Sure," Jax replied with a shrug. "Just call me the hyperdrive whisperer. More like the hyperdrive beggar," Santi quipped. Jax threw a wrench at him, missing by a mile. "Tell you what, if it works, you owe me a drink." "Deal," Santi agreed, catching the wrench on the rebound, twirling it like a toy. The iors ticked by as they worked, each creak and groan of the ship making them flinch. Outside, the stars hung silently, oblivious to the desperate repairs going on inside. Jax was deep in thought, poking at circuits like a hesitant surgeon. "If this hyperdrive could talk, it'd probably ask for a new owner," Jax muttered. "Or a swift death," Ryler added, passing him another tool. Santi leaned against the wall, tossing the wrench from hand to hand. "Maybe it just needs some motivation. You know, a little pep talk. Come on, buddy, you can do it. Just a little more juice and we're home free." Jax gave him a sidelong glance. "If motivational speeches fixed hyperdrives, I'd be a damn poet. Hell, I'd write sonnets," Santi mused. "But as it stands, I've got jokes and charisma. Not much help, huh?" As they worked, the gravity of their escape settled over them. Humor had been their shield, their sword, their everything. It was a concept that tickled the back of Ryler's mind, and he knew they had stumbled upon something significant. "Once we get this mess sorted," Ryler began, tightening a bolt with a grunt, "we need to transmit a report. Let HQ know that humor might actually be a defense, one they've probably never considered before." "Sure," Jax said, nodding. "Next time, just pack a comedian instead of a bunch of guns." "Hey, I'm a professional," Santi protested, mock offended. "If anyone deserves a medal, it's me." "I'll take the Saved by Laughter award, please," Ryler chuckled. "I'll second that. But seriously, this could change things. If the Vekari can be thrown off by something as simple as comedy, it's worth exploring." "You think they have a sense of humor?" Jax asked, raising an eyebrow. "Or are they just allergic to it?" "Either way, it works," Ryler replied. "And if it keeps us alive, I'm all for it." Santi nodded, his usual grin softening into something more introspective. "Who knew, right? That dark humor could be our best ally in a universe that wants us dead." "Never underestimate the power of a good punchline," Jax said, standing back to admire his handiwork. "All right, try it now. Let's see if she'll purr or spit in our faces." Ryler held his breath as he hit the switch. The hyperdrive word sputtered and then, mercifully, hummed to life. It was a sound like hope wrapped in an engine's thrum, and Ryler couldn't help but smile. "Nice work, Jax," he said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Looks like you're a miracle worker after all." Jax held up his hands, grinning. "I prefer engineering genius, but I'll take miracle worker if it comes with a pay raise." "Don't push it," Ryler said, though his tone was warm. As they wrapped up the repairs, the ship's comm system crackled to life, a reminder of the next step. "Let's get that report out. The Vekari might have backed off for now, but we're not out of the woods yet." Santi headed to the comms console, his fingers flying over the keys with ease. "All right, drafting our magnum opus. How do we title this?" "The Day Humanity Laughed in the Face of Death." "Stand up to standoff," Jax suggested, smirking. "Comedy saved the day," Ryler added, thoughtful. Santi grinned, typing. "Whatever it ends up being, they'll be talking about it for a while." Astro-Nomad delivers punchlines that pack a punch. The message transmitted, their little piece of history sent hurtling back to Earth. It felt surreal knowing they'd made a difference in the most unexpected way. "Do you think they'll believe us?" Jax asked, leaning back, his eyes fixed on the screen. "They should," Ryler said. "But even if they don't, we know what happened." And it worked. The ship settled into a rhythm, the tension of their flight easing into a quiet resilience. They were alive, battered but unbroken, and in the vast emptiness of space that was no small feat. Santi's voice broke the silence. "So, what's next?" "We lay low, wait for the heat to die down." "Yeah," Ryler said. "We need to repair what we can, restock if we hit a safe port. But most of all, we need to keep our heads down. The Vicari might not have a sense of humor, but they've got memories." Jax nodded. "And next time they might not find our jokes so funny." Ryler leaned back in his chair, watching the stars drift by. "Then we'll just have to keep coming up with new material. Always a step ahead," Santi said, raising an imaginary glass. "To the Astro-Nomad and her crew, the universe's funniest survivors." "Here's to that," Jax added, raising his own invisible toast. As they sailed on, the weight of their ordeal lightened by laughter and camaraderie, Ryler allowed himself a moment of peace. In a galaxy that often felt indifferent, they'd found a way to carve out their own story, one punchline at a time. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough.